Today we're going to replace the running belt on a T1000 treadmill, which is very similar to the T800 and the T400. The basic tools I'm going to need is a 6mm T-handle, metric set of Allen's, a Phillips screwdriver, magnetic, a 10mm wrench. Just to make things a lot quicker, I did an adapter with a 6mm, which will be adjusting the front roller. To get in a few more angles, 3 more Allens, and then I have a marker so when I adjust the front roller, then I know where to go back to it. So here we go. In assembly, we highly recommend not using electric assembly. Go back to using your normal because you don't want to over torque it. So you have outer holes and inner holes. The outer holes are going to be with your Phillips. They've changed its design, so now it's the upgraded 6mm Allen bolt that holds the side cover on. Then we have the top part. We're just going to pop that off. This is where I'm going to use my 13mm. I'm going to hold it. So I'm going to pull this out. So I'm going to be a little lazy here. I'm going to use my adapter. So I can use my 6mm where I can go into an adapter 6mm. Make sure not to lose a nut because a nut goes on the back side. We'll show you pictures of that later. Now I'm going to go to the front. I'm going to take the dry belt off. I have to be very cautious here. Want to make sure not to get any of the threads on here and mess this up. So I take the belt off. But remember to put the belt on the front roller when you put it back on. To get to this a lot easier in this area over here for the front roller. Number one, I'm going to take the grounding strap off. Number two, I'm going to move the electronics over so I can get to this 6mm. just going to loosen the left side with a Phillips, and I'm going to take the right side off. So then I can just move this out of the way. As you can tell, I can move it out of the way so I can get into here. This is where I'm going to bring all my tools down here for the front roller. Now before I do that, I'm going to mark this. We'll look down the center of the shaft so I have a reference. So when I bring it back, I know normally this is where it should go before I do my finite adjustments. And I have a 13 millimeter. Just like the rear roller, I have a locking nut. The locking nut on the back side. And then here I have a this is where I'm going to cheat and use my extender. So you can come in here with a 6 millimeter and slowly turn this, or you can cheat and use a 6 millimeter. Definitely want to keep these together, so when I put it back together, there you go. Now to take the belt and deck off, I have to take the sides off. So I have nuts underneath here that I just have to loosen. 13 millimeter. I normally do 10 little turns. It'll loosen it enough to slide this back. So I have one here. My second one is here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I loosen those 4, and this slides right back. So I can now get to the deck. Now from the deck, this is where I like using this tool. This is really nice. It's a 5 millimeter. Or you can use your 5 millimeter from your set. So you have a 13 millimeter or a 1/2 inch that's going to loosen this nut. And this pulls down on the rail. You can see on the channels. So now I'm going to do the other side. I'm going to look at the new belt and see if it has arrows for direction. This one does not have directions. It doesn't have arrows one way or the other. So because of this seam, it can go either way. So I don't have to worry about how it goes on. If it normally has arrows, the arrows would be at the top facing back because that would be the direction of the belt. So normally I'm going to just pick this up. I find this for myself the easiest way. Now this is where I get my screwdriver. This really helps. So the last one I took off is going to be the first one I put on. I'm going to put it through the hole, line up the hole. Just kind of wiggle it around. I'm not going to fully tighten it. I'm just going to barely turn it. I'm going to come all the way to the last one. Just gently wiggle it. Sometimes it just aligns the rubber if you just put that in the hole and wiggle it around. Once I get all of them on, then I'm going to torque them down, okay? Now this is critical. You want to have it snug, but you don't want to over tighten it. So we're going to show you the torque settings later. So as long as I can take like a finger, and I can't really push any more with one finger, that's the tightness you want. You don't want to two-handed and go too high because you're going to crush it too much. Or maybe two fingers, you can't really push it anymore, and that's going to be a torque setting for your bolts to your deck. So the next step we want to do is we want to put on the front roller. But don't forget the dry belt. It's very important. And it just slides into this hole over here. I'll put the belt on later. So now we're going to put on that side. We're going to put the right side on. Now remember, with this screw that goes on here, the screw goes through the roller. You got to have the locking nut in between here, and then you're going to want the grounding cord. Really helps with the static. So once the screw goes through the center of the front roller, I'm going to bring it and line it up to the marking that I put here. So it's pretty much right down the center where I had it before. So I don't forget, I'm going to screw down the grounding cable. So once I feel it's down the center, I'm going to use the locking nut to lock it in place with the grounding cord. So I pretty much locked it out right now. I've locked out the front roller to go right where the line was with the locking nut. Then I'm going to go on the back side of the locking nut and I'm going to tighten it down to the front roller. And this is just a good sure to make sure it's all, that the front roller is not going to adjust. The front roller can adjust to differentiations of the frame and the deck and the belt, and there's a lot of variables, so this is designed to take care of those. And once it's on there, it's not going to really go anywhere. It's back to the original line, so we have something to adjust. So I'm going to throw on the rear roller right now. So I'm going to go back to having a few of my basic tools. Normally I like to use a screwdriver to line it up. I'm going to line it up at this angle just to start it. And you want to bring it to the same level so you don't cross thread it. Now this is a good time that once the bolt goes in and starts to thread into the rear roller and it just starts peeking through on the other side, this is the good time to put in that nut, because sometimes that nut is hard to get. So I'm going to take this locking nut that we'll tighten after we're done, and I'm just going to hold it with my open end wrench, because if I use my closed end, I can't pull the closed end out with the bolt going through, so I'm going to hold it with the open end. And so now I'm adjusting the rear roller and tightening the nut at the same time. And once the rear roller starts pulling away, Then I'm going to stop and do the other side. There you go. You don't want to over tighten the nut. You just want it where it holds it in place. And you can see the rear rollers pulling away. So once it starts pulling away, I want to line everything. And remember, you want to do this by hand. You notice I'm not using my drill to really do this end because it's easy to cross thread this. And remember, if you cross thread it, it's not under warranty. But you can order the parts, but we prefer you didn't. Bring it level, hand thread it, you're good to go. And if the T handle takes you too long, you go to an L and just turn. But again, once you get it past the point here, go in there with the locking nut. Now's a good time to go in there with the locking nut and to hold it. So I'm going to just hold it. So as I'm turning this, I'm doing 2 items at the same time. I want to make sure it's not tight, and then I'm going to start turning it. Now I can start having a little bit of pressure on the belt. I'm going to put on my front drive belt. Now this is the critical part. This is how you can destroy the front drive belt or the pulley. You want to be very, very cautious with this. Do not get the threads of this screwdriver into the drive belt or the front roller. So what I like to do is I'll pull it on the inside. Make sure I move my running belt over. So I have a lot of room. See, I can go up to the front roller but not the pulley. So I put it on my pulley on the motor. I line this up. Now remember, when I took it off, I had 1 thread on each side, and right now it's on the motor side. So I'm just going to push it till it lines up. And normally a 45-degree angle is pretty much tensioned correctly. If not, we'll adjust it later. So that's pretty much the same way where it was before. I'm going to line this to the center. A lot of times people say, well, I'm going to line it to the center of the front roller, but the front roller you can have, it's more on one side than the other side because of the pulley. So I like to align it to the bolts. So I look here, and I know I don't have a tape measure, but a lot of times I'll just put my finger here, and I know it's about 1.5 inches. So it's about 1.5 inches on both sides. It's pretty level. We'll adjust it later. And now I'm going to adjust my tension of my belt. And I know that I'm going to be a little past halfway. I can start feeling some pressure. It takes a lot of pressure with one finger, so I know I'm pretty much there. Which is a little past halfway point. I can feel it starting to do a lot of pressure. It's pretty much sounding the same, so that once I get it together and I plug it in and I tension it, I can tighten one side or tighten the other side, not only to make it tension correctly, but also to track it back and forth. But that's in another video. Right now we're just showing you how to install this and replace it. So now that I have the rear roller on with the locking nut behind it, but I don't want to over tighten the locking nut. I wanted it so I could still move this to adjust it. I got my front roller on, my front pulley on. I got my locking nut in here, my other nut, and my grounding strap. Once I do the motor, I'll adjust all that up there. So I'm pretty much lined up. I'm ready to put the sides back on. So I just lift these up a little bit. First one takes a little bit more balance. So I'm just going to slide it in. And it's going to slide in this slot right here. And it's going to go all the way forward, it's going to hit forward. Now what I like to do is I don't like to tighten this down until after I put all the back on, because I want to make sure everything lines up correctly. So at this time, this is where I'm going to put on my safety, so this won't go back, and that If you stepped on the plastic here, it steps on metal, so you're not going to crack this or push against the roller. So I come in here. If you notice, I'm not using my impact wrench drill. I'm using hand screwdrivers assembling it, because this is an area that you can strip stuff. So we like to do it by hand, and I also like to use a magnetic tip. So I can feel it going in, so I'm not cross-threading it, and I'm not over-tightening it. Again, I'll adjust this in a minute. Now this has this beautiful little ring in here, so the ring goes in there. Then I'm going to slide the ends on. I'm going to line it up. And the best way is to use the Allen bolt on the outside with your T-handle. That's your easiest way. Look at that, it's just so easy. Before I fully tighten it, I'm going to put the screw at the bottom so I have some area that I can maneuver it. I don't want to tighten this and then it doesn't line up. There you go. So once I tighten the Phillips head screw, then I'm going to tighten this. Now I'm going to move this back, push this back, and after I push it back, I'm going to hold it. Now I'm going to tighten down with the 13 millimeter or 1/2 inch. Remember, it was about 10 little turns. And normally I'm just going to push on 2 or 3 fingers. I don't want to get a big wrench and overturn it and explode this. So about 2 or 3 fingers. There you go, like 3 fingers. If I can't pull it anymore, I'm pretty much good. Now I pushed it back and I tightened these up, so the rest of these should line up pretty easily. We're going to put our support mount on. It's just 2 screws right here. Oh, I forgot to slide the sides on. So here we go. Two Phillips screws. This is a nice little piece. Kind of makes the finish look really nice. Before it's fully tightened, I'm going to put the little screw down on the back. Gives me area to wiggle it around. Now this moves, so I'm going to push it all the way back with my palm. I'm going to try to tension this. And once I can't push it anymore with 2 to 3 fingers, I know it's tight enough. Again, you're pulling down on this mold, you're pulling it down with these bolts. In 2 or 3 fingers, you're good to go. And I'll continue on the rest of them. you go, these are all on, the back's on, the sides are on, the front roller's all connected, it's pretty close. So now I'm going to throw my hood back on. Before I throw my hood back on, I've got to move the electronics back over. Again, I'm going to use my extended Phillips. Now I didn't take the first one off. I just loosened it so I can slide it in. There's a notch. There's a notch in the aluminum. I'm going to slide it in, and I can see the hole on the other side. So I get my extended magnetic screwdriver. Because my right side of my electronics has a very easy access. The left side, there's a lot of wires in the way. So it's good to just do a quick turn, but not to assemble. So now that I got my electronics back, everything's connected. I'm going to throw my hood back on. I'm going to line it all up. So you have 2 screws on the right side, 2 screws on the left side, and you have 3 back here. There's a very thick mold, so they're pretty long. As you can tell, they're very long. And I like to get them all in before I tighten them down, so if I have to move it around, I can still find the hole. Sometimes you gotta search a little bit, as I'm doing on this one. Now this one I hit, so I moved the clip over, so I have to take it off. When I took the front roller off, I moved it. Want to make sure the cap is on the top going down. So I'm going to make sure it's the same on the other side, which it is. Let's see if this goes a little easier. There you go. Now that I have them all in, now I'm going to tighten them down. And it's just a couple fingers. You don't have to over tighten it. Just a couple fingers. Snug up the plastic, you're good to go. So there's your replacement of your running belt. Now I'm going to take the treadmill, go plug it in, and do my final alignment.